I'm excited, Leo. So I've been a member of this group for like 2 years. Been one of the best groups I've been in. Traders, Alpha, great team behind it. So hopefully we can ordinal pill some people today. I'm excited.
Nice. Awesome. Yeah, I really appreciate you guys having us up. I mean, it's always fun to kind of share about ordinals. And I mean, Trevor, I don't know about you, but I'm down to they can unmute themselves, right? And kind of share and we can have an open conversation, correct?
Yeah, definitely.
Awesome. Awesome. Do you want to kick this off or should I?
Poppy, do you want to kick it off or?
Sure. Just want to thank everyone for joining us today. Today's conversation is going to be BTC Ordinals. I know it's a mad world that we live in. I feel like we're playing on all different chains, whether it's CK Zinc, are we talking about R, but today's topic is going to be BTC Ordinals. So we're going to jump right in, talking about inscribing ordinals, some things like running nodes, BRC20 coins, which are something fairly new. And I'll just give it off to you, Trevor and Leonidas. Thank you for joining us today.
Yeah, definitely. I can maybe give you guys an intro, like how I got into ordinals, and then how Leo and I teamed up to do the ordinal show. And Leo could probably talk about how he saw the opportunity for ordinals. I think we came at from different directions, which have been kind of been good to share. Like I've learned a lot from Leo and his perspective, and I kind of came at it more from the VC angle. I've had this thesis about Bitcoin and Web3 since I got into the space in 2021 and around March, when I got into Bitcoin in 2013, and I've been a entrepreneur and builder for more than a decade, like building my own apps, launching my own startups, and I kind of stayed away from the space until 2021 because I saw the promise of the technology of blockchain, but I knew it was like highly inefficient and like, it's costly and slow, and I wasn't sure what the use cases would be. And so when I saw like ICOs in 2018, I was like, I've never been a trader until actually I joined MVHQ, and I've been like learning to be a trader, and I've made a lot of good trades thanks to all the people in this community. But I've always been like a product person, a developer, a builder focused on like 0 to 1. I have a background in like lean startup and go to market. And 2018, I was like seeing all these like ads for like Datecoin and Jesus Coin, and seeing startups raise like ridiculous amounts of money while having like nothing to show for it, like like EOS and things like that, where it just seemed like ridiculous to me and not something that I would even consider. And then when I saw 2021, I had the fortune of knowing the Stacks team, like the founders. I was an early advisor to them in 2013, and I'd always followed what they were doing back to the Blockstack days when they were essentially building something like similar to what we're seeing with like Ordinals and BRC20, but I think the timing was just off. And I think we'll see. I think that Stacks' time will still come, after the block space gets very expensive here, as it's getting now. We're seeing like 150 sats per VByte. We could go 5 to 10x from here, I think, especially leading into the bull in terms of the demand for Bitcoin block space. But I always had this idea that like, thanks to my knowledge of Stacks and knowing the team, and they have like, PhDs from Princeton and MIT and Stanford, I believe, on their team, like, really smart computer scientists that are above my level. But the idea of like, Bitcoin is the base of the most users, the most liquidity, and it's a single purpose blockchain, or at least until now, it's been a single purpose blockchain just for transactions and for store value. And that's still, I think, a big strength of it when it comes to Bitcoin script being far more limited than EVM, that it's a higher security, lower attack surface, single use case, and that other functionality can be built on top using that block space. And so that was always the thesis that I got into from 2021. And I think that network effects are extremely powerful and extremely hard to disrupt. If you look at the history of the internet, it's like we still have Craigslist today, like we still have eBay, we still have like these companies from Web 1, which don't really innovate in terms of their UX, in terms of their value proposition, but their network effects are so strong that they're just still here, and they'll be here for a long time to come. And that's how I feel about Bitcoin, that it's smarter for developers to build on top of that as a base layer. I knew Ethereum, and I'm a big fan of Ethereum, but I think that will be in a future where both Ethereum and Bitcoin are the dominant two chains, just like now, but that will include all use cases. And so I think that there's other use cases, like I think of like a super high speed, like Solana has use cases. But I think that the lowest hanging fruit for me was always like, if I was looking for an asymmetric opportunity, it'd be building on Bitcoin. And so I knew this was going to happen eventually. I just didn't know how it would happen. I had previously thought that Ethereum would flip Bitcoin, and I saw like the sort of the culture of Bitcoin, the Bitcoin maxis being a big hindrance to developers coming in. I think ultimately the ecosystems that win are just the ones that have the most and the best developers. Like, I think that's the core metric that I look at. And when Ordinals dropped, when it was around like 600 or so, and I've been following Udi Wertheimer for a long time because I think he's a very smart person, and he's a few steps ahead when it comes to understanding the culture. He's been in the Bitcoin space for a long time. And when he dropped the 4 megabyte block for Taproot Wizards, it was just like similar to what I saw in 2021 with the Beeple sale. Like, I think the Beeple sale for me was like a moment I look back on being like, all right, that was like the kickoff of NFTs. That was like the kickoff of the wave of innovation in NFTs. I know that there's a lot of companies that were working on it for a long time before that. OpenSea's been around for a long time. They were kind of like weathering the storm and ready for that wave ahead of time. But then, an avalanche of developers came in, after that moment. So seeing like MetaMask, the user experience of MetaMask being better than anything I've ever seen in the space at that time, seeing Uniswap, which had been going on for a while, and the Beeple sale for me was like, hey, everything has come together. That's when I decided to go all in on Web3, and then seeing the 4 megabyte Taproot Wizard block. I wasn't like sure right away, but I was like sure that something was going on. And I host this Twitter Spaces with NFT Now called Not Financial Advice, and I've had like a bunch of the MVHQ people on it. Mitch and Jacob were regulars on the show, and that's when I was like kind of calling it out, being like, hey, Ordinals, like, you have to check on it. That weekend, I like dropped everything and just focused on like inscribing stuff. And I called a friend of mine who's a really good artist, and at her, I was like, whatever you're doing right now, stop doing it. Like, you have to make an art project for Ordinals. And then the week after, when we passed 1,000, it was like doubling every day. So started hosting Twitter Spaces, linked up with Leo, who was also running Twitter Spaces on the NFT history with NFT Now. So luckily we got to meet through that. And it's just been like sort of a wild ride since then, where I have like constantly set like new benchmarks for like what I thought would be like crazy, and then like exceeded those. Like, the idea, like we were saying like we would get to 1 million inscriptions, at the end of this year, and like here we are looking at like probably reaching 4 million and within 24 hours from now. BRC20 was something I didn't really expect to happen, but like where I see the space going is essentially like that. What we've seen with Ordinals is that they have it's a very small indexer. So like, you think about like a blockchain versus an indexer, it's kind of a spectrum of it's on a spectrum for like what you can get for it. So like for an indexer, you can get very little, right? Like the problem with indexers is that they rely on more of a social consensus, and they there can be a lot of like, people can index things differently. At Ninja Alerts, I'm very familiar with indexers because we have our own indexer that we work with like low level Infura node functionality, and we're like moving over away from Infura to like the Amazon hosted node solution. And so even on EVM, like, indexing is a bit of a challenge. But that kind of put when I saw Ordinals, it's like the indexer is very small. Actually, most of the functionality that you use exists on Bitcoin, and it's a clever way to do it with Bitcoin script, where like it's the Satoshi is inscribed to a UTXO, which is like a pack of Satoshis. As opposed to like Ethereum and Bitcoin uses a UTXO model. Ethereum just uses an account model. So the UTXOs themselves can be like, it's like if I send you one Ethereum, for example, on Bitcoin, that would be like sending a UTXO. If I have one, and if you have that one Ethereum and you want to send 0.5 to one person and 0.5 to another person, you have to split that into two separate like bags of money, essentially, and then you're sending that like bag of money almost like it's a box, like a FedEx box or something, or UPS box. And so through that model, that's how they've been able to do ordinal theory. Ordinal theory is like the only thing on the indexer. Everything else, the trading, the inscription, the like the pointer, those are all like through Bitcoin script. And so you have like a tiny indexer with like leveraging Bitcoin script in a unique way. I think that's what we have with BRC20 as well, but it's a little more complicated. It might also, I think it probably is also the right sweet spot. Because what you end up happening is like something that's not a perfectly compartmentalized technology can become quite viable if there's enough demand and resources behind it. So I always believe like a subpar technology that has enough demand and traction will beat the better technology, because it will become the better technology through enough resources and people and interest. It's like never the better technology that wins. It's always the good enough technology with the widest distribution. And so, I think that we'll end up in an area where we have like certain assets on L1, and then on the L2s like stacks and others, that's where people are going to add the rest of the functionality. So you have like a 20-80 rule where it's like ordinals are 20% of the functionality, but they deliver maybe 80% of the use case of what an NFT is. We'll see ordinals focused really on high-end luxury art, and then, like we've seen like Bugatti coming in. We've seen like, you go 12-fold. We've had a lot of great bands adopt it right away, I think, because it's Bitcoin at the end of the day. Bitcoin has a 2.5x liquidity base of Ethereum. A lot of them are not activated yet into ordinals, but I think that they will be over the coming year, that more and more people who have big bags of Bitcoin are going to be very interested in the ordinal space. Now that like there's a lot of evidence mounting up about how good it is for Bitcoin, how it's bringing new people into Bitcoin. And so I had previously been under the assumption that there would be like L2s would have like most of the use case and functionality, but now we're finding out that more can be done on L1, but there are limitations to it. And then like L2s are going to be needed to do the rest of the functionality. Whereas like you might have 100% of that use case on EVM and on Ethereum. You'll have like 20% bringing 80% of the value, and then those assets will be bridged or integrated with various L2s. And so as like a trader, it's a really good time to be watching what's happening, because there's like new crazy stuff every single day. There's like a very high skill cap. There's a very large design space. And so I think that means there's like a lot of alpha. Whereas Ethereum space right now, it's like mature. We've seen everything play out already. Being in ordinals, you're like watching the same movie again, but it's like, the director's cut, or it's like a different version of the same movie, and you can see a lot of the same patterns, but there's a much bigger opportunity to be first, or to leverage the knowledge I think that people have gained in the Ethereum space over the past 2 years to see how this plays out in Bitcoin, because we've seen with even the BRC20s, like the Ordi token. Leo, I don't know if you got any Ordi, but I didn't get any Ordi. I should have. It's like at 150 market cap right now. It was 100 market cap, 100 million market cap like a few days ago. It went down to 50. Now it's back up to 150. We've seen, I think, like 30 million in ordinal trading volume. There's been some big sales. There's been like, I think the biggest sale is like 11 BTC sale. So that's like $300,000. We haven't seen any $1 million sales yet, but if you look at like Bitcoin Magazine has come into the ordinal space in a very, very big way. Like we're starting to see, like they have like a OTC desk that they're making. Like we're starting to see the pieces come together, where I think more liquidity is going to come in, and it's it has if it's relative to Bitcoin's liquidity, if it's 50% as involved, then it's going to be equal in size to Ethereum. Is how I think about it. So it's kind of my intro. Leo, I'll pass it back over to you to comment and give your perspective.
Yeah, great stuff. I pretty much agree with everything you said. I feel like we spend too much time on Twitter Spaces, so we're ideologically aligned way too much right now. So I'll probably be echoing a lot of what Trevor just said, but yeah, I'm the founder of Ord.io. It's an Ordinals Explorer, and I got into Bitcoin back in 2014 as a freshman in college. I thought, I saw that chart of Bitcoin's price, and it was just completely bonkers, and had to get involved, and got in from that speculative side, but eventually found my way to Ethereum and kind of just left Bitcoin in the dust. It seemed like all of the excitement as a developer was to be on the Ethereum side of things. That's where all the bleeding edge things were happening. And, got to play CryptoKitties and, was introduced to the ERC 721 standard in 2017 and just thought that was all super cool. So when NFTs come around again in early 2021, just realize that, this is a primitive that's very important. It's not just going to be fungible tokens, which is like, the slices of the pie, the shares in the company, however you want to think about it. We're also going to have unique tokens, and that obviously represents a pretty large market of intangible assets. So just went down the rabbit hole into NFTs even further, really ended up in the historical kind of NFT space. So like researching a lot about just the history of NFTs. I've spent most of my time there for the last few years. And I got to meet this guy, Casey. He came into the historical NFT Discord last summer, claiming to have found the oldest NFTs because he had figured out a way to use a first in, first out accounting mechanism to number every sat. So every Bitcoin is 100 million sats. So he basically numbered a quadrillion sats. And that allows you to essentially use this accounting method to track sats individually. So came at it from the historical kind of side of things, a little skeptical. It's like this guy is coming in with this crazy idea, and eventually got to, know Casey a little bit better and understand more what he was doing. And he finally released the protocol in January of this year and added a very important feature, which was inscriptions. So the SAT is just that ownership token. So, Punk 6529 owns the ownership token 6529 on the CryptoPunks V2 contract. But, ultimately that image is stored usually somewhere else. Specifically in the case of CryptoPunks, it was just a hash of that image, and now they're actually fully on chain on Ethereum, which is really cool. But the inscription on Bitcoin is that image, so it's stored fully on chain. So people are literally taking, I inscribed a video of Starship taking off onto Bitcoin. I have fun inscribing lots of cool things onto Bitcoin. Like you can literally store any file type that you want. People are creating games. I'm playing these retro games that I see popping up in the newest feed every day. And it's really fun. People are having fun with the inscription part, but the way you get an NFT primitive is tying that SAT, which is now essentially an unique ownership token, and that inscription together. What you get is essentially product market fit as an NFT. So you see all of the kind of standard, all the standard things happening, PFP projects, artists, this sort of thing. And you end up with this ERC 721 type standard on Bitcoin. And with BRC20, you're seeing essentially the ERC20 standard. So the pattern we're clearly seeing play out here is, Web3 happened on other chains, and for a variety of reasons I won't get into too much here, but that didn't happen on Bitcoin, largely for I think more so just a cultural reason. I think the maxis basically believed that Bitcoin wasn't going to be able to compete technically in this new world of Web3, so they were just going to kind of create this narrative that all of the Web3 activity was bad, and we should only be doing a single use case on Bitcoin, which is the Bitcoin currency. And that wall basically came down over the past 3 months with the release of Ordinals. Casey introduced Ordinal theory, and all of a sudden we have NFTs on Bitcoin, a solid protocol for NFTs on Bitcoin. There had been experiments in the past, like Counterparty and Rare Pepes are a pretty notable example there. But you get clear product market fit where people are creating NFTs and projects on Bitcoin and just doing basically everything you've seen on these other chains. It's just now happening on Bitcoin, and the same thing's happening for fungible tokens. And you're starting to see, startups popping up trying to do DeFi. So basically that wall has come down. Bitcoin, I would not think of it as this single use kind of boring old legacy chain that doesn't change very much. People are finding ways to use the existing Bitcoin protocol to hack these kind of clever vertical use cases on top of it. And now that we have the two very core primitives of fungible tokens, which is BRC20 and ordinal inscriptions, which are the ERC 721, you're basically you're getting this kind of Web3 organic kind of ecosystem growing. We've probably got 200 developers working full time in this new, I'll just call it Bitcoin Web3, people building on layer 1. And as Trevor mentioned, there's people also experimenting with layer 2, knowing that at some point in time, the demand on layer 1 is just going to force people to layer 2. So they're just trying to be one step ahead there. But you don't have to overthink this really. The main primitives on Ethereum and Solana and these other chains are coming to Bitcoin, and you're going to see probably people doing very similar things like liquidity pools and lending and this sort of thing on Bitcoin in the future. You know, somebody figured out that, you know, if I have this NFT, I want to trade it with someone natively on Bitcoin, but nobody knew how to do this. Somebody just kind of theorized, hey, we can use this like partially signed Bitcoin transaction protocol and do this atomic swap. And, you know, need is the mother of invention. You know, we figured out a way to make marketplaces natively on Bitcoin, and now we have, you know, a dozen different marketplaces for trading NFTs natively on Bitcoin. So from my perspective, we're going to see most of the popular use cases for Web3 happen on Bitcoin layer 1 and then trickle down to layer 2 over the coming years. And that's just really exciting when you're kind of like a trader or an investor, you're just looking at the market size. Like I tweet out these kind of pictures of like market caps, like these circles. And, you know, Bitcoin is like $500 billion. ETH is, you know, $250 billion. And yet half the value on the Ethereum blockchain is things other than the ETH currency. Except, you know, when you look at Bitcoin, it's like 99.9% of the value on the Bitcoin blockchain is the Bitcoin currency. So there's just this really asymmetric opportunity where if Web3 is indeed going to come to Bitcoin, right, for a variety of reasons, people like Bitcoin, you know, it's inferior in certain technical ways, but it makes up for it in just the fact that immutability and security and decentralization and the brand name just lend a lot of organic attraction to, you know, holding an asset on Bitcoin. Like for whatever reason, people psychologically like and value holding an asset fully on chain on Bitcoin, and they assign value to that is kind of higher from what I've seen than if you were to do that exact same asset on another chain. And yeah, we're going to see, you know, the bull case would be we're going to see Bitcoin over the coming years have developers come in and build all of the Web3 stuff that we know and love on top of Bitcoin. And that ratio of like just, you know, 1 to 4,000 of the value on Bitcoin being Web3 assets versus the BTC currency. I mean, in the bull case, it goes 1 to 1, the same as it is on like Ethereum or Solana. So that's kind of like what you're betting on. And, you know, there's definitely a world where this plays out very differently, but that is more or less the bull case. And we're definitely seeing the organic kind of interest there. So I very much believe that developers are just going to kind of build out the solutions and improve the user experience, which is the main pain point at the moment. That's kind of how I'm viewing things. Trevor, I'll kind of hand it back to you if there's anything you want to touch on there, and then maybe we can do some Q&A.
Yeah, no, I mean, I definitely agree. Everything you said, Leo. I mean, you know, before Ordinals hit, I was like, kind of like, had a lot of conviction about this idea, like, and I had a belief that this would for sure happen. And now it's like, it's already happened I mean, it hasn't happened yet as far as everyone else is concerned, but for my book, it's already happened. I mean, there's just so much upside now in building on Bitcoin, and the culture has changed. And right now we're living in this like we're like us in the Ordinal space, like we're in a bull market. Like it's like, it feels like it was in like 2021 when I was here in MVHQ every single day being like, what project are people just gonna, you know, jump into on Mint right now? It's like, it's not too far off for how we feel in the Ordinals community, because things are happening every day. There's like multiple new things launching every single day. To the extent where it's like, I feel like I'm spending hours every single day on this, and I feel like I'm falling behind. And so it's super exciting. And I think that in terms of upside, it's just like, it's going from zero. It's going to go from zero to potentially, you know, it has the potential to surpass Ethereum with, like, as I said, like 50% of the liquidity participating. Then there's going to be more liquidity. And so, you know, we're seeing a lot of also people coming back to Bitcoin. I mean, like some of the biggest people who built this space are all started on Bitcoin. I mean, Vitalik started Bitcoin Magazine back in the day. CZ, Arthur Hayes of BitMEX, you know, OKX. I mean, all the biggest, like Coinbase, all the biggest players, you know, started out on Bitcoin, and now there's sort of more excitement and also more understanding of like what the space is really about, which is about, you know, recreating the financial system in a digital way, and that involves, you know, being a degen, that involves trading, and that these things are not, you know, it's the problem with Bitcoin is that they looked at the space through the lens of like cognitive dissonance, being like, we can't do this on Bitcoin, and so therefore it's bad. But, you that's completely changed now, and I think Bitcoin has the benefit of learning from everything that's been happening on Ethereum and other chains. I don't think that Bitcoin will destroy Ethereum. I don't want it to either. Like I think that we need to have multiple alternatives in the space to give people options and to keep innovation strong. But my theory was that we would see a flippening until Web3 started on Bitcoin. So now that started, I think that like Bitcoin is going to be a very attractive place to be in addition to Ethereum.
Completely agree. Trevor, BTC Alchemist is asking in the voice hangout chat, he said, there have been 2 instances of ordinal index problems with inscription numbers. Some early inscriptions not included in the index, and a recent 0 value ordinal sent to a miner. How problematic do you view this? What is the latest discussion about the solution to this?
Yeah, I mean, in terms of ordinals, I view it as a nothing burger. I think it was kind of cool that someone did that, but again, the indexing here is so simple that there's minimal risk, right? So the question of like how viable is like this indexer model? I mean, we already see Counterparty being like a fully built out set of tools and use cases which already work with using this model of an indexer and op return. And there are limitations to that. So like, if you guys come to one of our Twitter spaces, I do like a rare stamps airdrop every time to get people to try out Counterparty. But they have like a DEX. They have a something called dispensers where you can like list a semi-fungible token like ERC1155, and then people just send Bitcoin to it to claim it, and it will send it back to them. They have dividends, which is like once you have a certain number of users that own an asset, you can do an airdrop to all of them within one transaction. Like there's some freaking amazing cool stuff that you can do. And now some of it has rough edges compared to Ethereum, but the trade-off that you get with this is that for example, with the ordinals and inscriptions, working with an Ethereum, on for Ninja alerts, like we've seen a lot of weird things. Like you have, and I'm sure you guys know about this, but you have like people, minting from contract to someone else's wallet. You have people, sending an asset to someone's wallet and then like transferring it back because they can write the transfer function any way they want. There's like so much flexibility when it comes to EVM that you kind of have the ability to hang yourself with it. Whereas on Bitcoin, you have like more rough edges, but at the same time, that can help you in some ways because you kind of have a predictability of knowing what you're going to get. And so part of the reason why BRC20 actually took off and was so successful is because the protocol was designed in a way where essentially every token is like a fair launch. So you send a deploy transaction, and then it's like a first come first serve. Whoever submits the JSON after that to claim it, you can set a max per claim. Like you can't have like all the people deploying these meme coins not able to like take all the coins for themselves. Also, there's no smart contract for it, so there's no need to like with the shit coins we're seeing. Like first 2 things that people want to know is like how much supply does the team have, and number 2, like did they relinquish control of the contract? Neither of those are relevant in BRC20 because neither of them are possible. And so you have this interesting dynamic where it's like you have like a few more rough edges, but then, and there's ways to compensate for that, which some are good and some, we haven't figured out yet. But you essentially make these trade-offs where lack of functionality is actually a benefit, not a detractor from it. And so
yeah, it's very counterintuitive, but like I've definitely come to the same conclusion. Like when people want to store value, you get like very disproportionately punished when there's any like sort of weird question or something. And I definitely like noticed this with like some of these like earlier contracts on Ethereum, like these historical NFT contracts, where if there was just some ever slight bug or something weird going on, just nobody wants to touch it, right? Because like even though it's only this 1% chance that thing plays out, you get like 99% of the value is lost because people want absolute rock solid. You sleep well at night. You don't have to think about it. And like that is the product market fit that like ordinal inscriptions have, I would say, Trevor. It's like the protocol is so dead simple, right? There's a SAT and you associate this image that you inscribed on chain to it, and there's nothing else to do. Like, you can't enforce royalties. You can't update the metadata because it's always frozen. There is no like way to change anything. There is no renouncing contracts. There is no, bug in this function. There is no way to have an operator filter because there's no smart contract to like give that access to. It's very unique. Like you're just getting this like core, like I want to hold a very, very simplistic like digital object, and it's not going to get, the image is not going to go away unless like Bitcoin goes away. So everything about it is fully on chain and just very simple, and there's like, it's like the lack of things you can do is almost the value proposition. And we're just seeing that the market for certain use cases, specifically like the higher end blue chip kind of luxury assets, values these properties a lot. And if you want to like create some really bleeding edge game, or do something at a lot larger scale with like millions of potential users, like that's obviously not the fit for Bitcoin layer 1. But what we see is about 2/3 of the market cap of NFTs on Ethereum are the top 100 projects and artists. So there is a very large market for like the blue chip luxury assets, and that's essentially the slice of the market that Bitcoin is kind of coming after with ordinal inscriptions. And yeah, I mean, you can basically just go, download an Xverse wallet or Hero wallet or one of these wallets that are essentially the MetaMask of Bitcoin, and then just go to a marketplace and buy a really cheap ordinal inscription and check it out on an Explorer, and just kind of have that psychological experience of owning a digital object that's fully on chain on Bitcoin. And like I just really like knowing that no one's going to kind of mess with that token and my ownership of that token, because there's no way you could really do something like that. Whereas I collect historical NFTs from like 2018 where I don't know what the images look like because they've disappeared, or the founder all of a sudden just issued another 1 million tokens on the contract because there was a function that let them do that. So you basically have this kind of like rock solid framework in your head of like, I feel good about this asset's going to be here in 100 years. I feel pretty good about that. Whereas you just have a little bit less of that on other chains. Like I'm not dunking on Ethereum. I hold a ton of Ethereum NFTs. I just think the use case for Ethereum NFTs and some of these other chains is better suited for, I want to take advantage of like crazy smart contract functionality to do some like really innovative mint or this sort of stuff. But if you just like want to own an object for like the next 20 years as a store of value, like Bitcoin inscriptions on the Ordinals protocol are like really good at that.
Yeah, well said, Leo. And so the question was about like how do you actually trade? So the two main places that I use are Gamma.io and Magic Eden. I use the Xverse wallet and the Hero wallet. That's for ordinal inscriptions. If you want to do BRC20s, then you would use Unisat.io and download the Unisat wallet. I expect like in a couple of weeks there'll be alternatives for trading the BRC20s. JPEG's asked me like why I haven't gotten any order yet. Dude, I'm gonna get some, man. I just gotta. I'm like halfway through it. Dude, you guys. I think for those people who know me in MVHQ, like I'm not the most degen. Like you guys are like my degen like personal trainers in here. So I kind of faded the ordi, and like for me NFTs make a lot more sense. I never was like a meme coin trader, so I'm gonna get some ordi. It went it was 100 million market cap, then dropped down to 50. I just wasn't sure, like I have like BRC20 was not like something I thought would be this big for sure. My approach is like to look for evidence of why something's not going to work, or why I might be wrong about something. But from my perspective, like I'm more interested in when these BRC20s can be used as like utility tokens. So for like like in the use cases of like Blur, or in the use case of like Uniswap, like that's going to be in a couple weeks. Like we'll start to see. And I think we already are seeing some people. Like I saw like Ord's Games, which is a guy named Zeth who's like runs one of the ordinal communities in China. Like he's like has like this on-chain HTML5 game. That's another thing people don't realize about ordinals, is that you can inscribe anything. It's like so simple. You don't need any contract. You just like upload the file. Like people like the 443rd ordinal was a full HTML5 clone of Doom. Like the first person shooter. So like in the first 1,000 inscriptions, we already had like PDFs, music, movies, games, and like Ord's games, like they're using their token to like give it out to people who play the like use their website. So like I'm more interested in that. Like I should probably pick some of that up right after this. Versus I think Ordi is the number one. It's like was the first BRC20 ever. So that might have some more. And Leo's site or.io, he just posted in the Boys Hangout. That's the best place to check for like different inscriptions and for the games and stuff. I'll pick up some Ordi just because it's the first one, but I think the other meme coins, I'm gonna try and focus on like ones that have like potential utility. And then to follow up on BTC Alchemist's point about like the indexing problem, I personally think BRC20 is probably easy enough to index because again, we see Counterparty doing the same thing. If you guys really want to like kind of deep dive into what's going to come next, I think Counterparty is the best ecosystem to play around with. I'd recommend downloading Free Wallet. I actually have a website. I do these airdrops every single Twitter Spaces, where if you can pay like $2 in Bitcoin to claim it, and then you just pay gas, and I give these out. That's like to get people to play around with it, and they have a DEX. They have fungible tokens. They have everything, and I think we're going to see. But the challenge is there's only like 2 or 3 developers in the Counterparty ecosystem, so they don't really have like the horsepower to iterate on and make it better. Whereas like the Ordinals ecosystem, I think has become. I think the biggest Bitcoin ecosystem is the Ordinals ecosystem now. It's far bigger than all the other Bitcoin communities. That's why we're seeing Bitcoin Magazine get into it. And in terms of the indexing challenge with like Ordinals, again, like it's really not a problem because it can just be fixed so easily. Like socially, people are going to have to come to a collective agreement of what truth is and what the history is. But because everything's on chain and it's very simple to run an algorithm to index it and come up with exactly what happened, the conversation is like not going to lead into a deadlock. And I think it'll be similar with BRC20, though it'll be harder than with Ordinals. And at some point, what you'll see is like the more complicated the protocol, and the challenge is like with BRC20, it's like a meta protocol on top of Ordinals. As soon as you start to have like a meta protocol on top of a meta protocol on top of a meta protocol, like you're going to end up, people are going to be building themselves in a corner where there's just not enough users, like, so, it might be more likely that like, instead of like a protocol on top of BRC20, like a meta protocol on top of a meta protocol, like that's where L2s come in because the indexing challenge becomes too difficult. Because the real issue with the indexing protocol is that you have to socially coordinate with multiple people to where you have like a simple conversation about agreeing what truth is based on the on-chain data. As soon as you start to get into like there, we had someone on the show on Wednesday night who has a proposal for a Uniswap swap pool. Like anything you can do on Ethereum can be done just by recording on Blockspace. Like if you can make if something is an Ethereum transaction, it can be put on the block space of Bitcoin as well, even in the same code, and then someone can re-index it to kind of reconcile it later. Because like with the block space, you have people can post whatever they want. So the indexer needs to decide which ones are legit transactions, which ones are fake. They have to weed that out. Whereas on Ethereum, like a validator will just like, when someone submits a transaction that doesn't make any sense, they just won't include it in the block. So that's like kind of difference. It's like more work on the Bitcoin side, and you need to rely on the indexer, and it breaks down when there's not enough demand and too much risk and too much social coordination. So I'm pretty confident in the BRC20s or some type of fungible token standard being on the L1, and then like what extra complexity we can add on top of it. I think indexers break at some point, and then it's going to go over to L2s.
You brought up an interesting point there that I think might not have been, we might not have explained totally well to some of the people here who maybe are just getting started with Ordinals. So I think, in one of the questions about BRC20, it was kind of implied and in your answer that, an earlier number is better. So this is a unique dynamic to the like whole Ordinals like market. When Casey released the Ordinals protocol, it's basically just like a super rare contract. So it's just a one-of-one contract where you release you inscribe a single like file onto Bitcoin, and then that gets a number based on the order it was inscribed in. So the first one is number 0, and then it's 1, 2, 3, 4, and then we're up to like 3.8 million now. And every single inscription, every single file stored on Bitcoin gets a unique number, and that adds this like extra layer that you don't really have on Ethereum or these other chains, where people are like creating these clubs like sub 1,000 club, sub 10,000 club. Like I'm personally like bullish on the kind of low inscription narrative. Like I think it's cool, like owning one of the first like 100. So I own inscription number 69, for example. Like I think that's just like a neat kind of collectible thing. Like a lot of people like just won't care about that sort of thing, but to me that's like just a kind of neat thing to be able to say I hold one of the first 100 ordinal inscriptions when there's like a billion at some point in the future. So that does add this like kind of extra layer of people. People are like using these round numbers usually by 10. So it's like 1,000, 10,000, 100,000, 1 million. And we kind of celebrate on Twitter when we hit these like checkpoints. And then all of a sudden it's like a new era. Like we're in the 1 million to 10 million era now. And I think it's just like kind of like basic like human psychology to just like focus on low numbers for whatever reason. We've seen this with like ENS with their kind of number craze in the past. And we've like certainly seen that kind of dominate this market, at least early on here for ordinal inscriptions. And I think that's definitely what you're seeing with BRC20. I promised on Twitter a few days ago, I'm not going to talk about any specific BRC20 tickers ever, even in like private messaging. So I'm not going to bring up any specific tokens, but the general trend is you're seeing the market valuing the earlier BRC20 tokens, because those are also getting like they hacked they realized the clever marketing scheme of like numbering them, and when you number things, people want the first one. So we're seeing, of course, like the first ones are the most valuable. So that's just something to understand about the market that does not really exist elsewhere. And one other thing is the actual SAT that you're inscribing on. We're seeing people actually value SAT in addition to the inscription. So yes, people are valuing if an inscription was early, or like if the artist of the inscription, is a very talented artist, you'll obviously value that more than maybe just if I just uploaded a picture of a poop emoji or something. That's not going to be very valuable. All the standard NFT stuff of valuing, that image and that art, but also because the actual token itself is this unique SAT, that's an extra layer of value that like is this other layer of collectability that you can kind of peel back in the market, where people are specifically inscribing on, I call them sattributes, like these like sats that have like unique attributes. So just for example, if it's in the first 1,000 blocks, like on Ord.io, we call those vintage sats. If it was a sat from the 10,000 Bitcoin pizza transaction, so there's a trillion sats from that transaction, like we index all trillion sats and mark inscriptions on those sats with a little pizza icon, and those are like the pizza sats. And we have a few other ones like sats that were mined by Satoshi, sats that were the first sat in a block are called uncommon. That's like a rarity scheme created by the founder Casey. So there's all these like just weird layers of like this market, where if you come to the market, you're going to be pretty confused seeing like somebody buy, a low inscription rock for like way more than like some other inscription of a rock that was like by an actually famous artist. Or if you see, somebody buying just the single sat for like $10,000, that seems objectively insane until you realize that that's like an ultra rare sat where there's only like 350 of them that match the rule you would apply to get that sat attribute out of like all 2.1 quadrillion sats that can exist. So these are just things to kind of keep in the back of your head, where this is Bitcoin. So because we're doing things a little bit weird, that manifests itself in how the market actually participates in speculating on these assets. And you do want to kind of like spend a little bit of time understanding those different nuances in the market before just jumping in, because these are things that, at least for the current moment in time, collectors, like the market is voting that they value these certain things. And, that thesis, obviously, like with BRC20, is the difference between a token being $150 million and, $50. So definitely important to understand these trends.
Yeah, and Leo, maybe we could talk a little bit like what the value of ordinals is over like ERC 721 or Ethereum NFTs. I think kind of like to give people like the high level, like I think one thing that was very innovative about this is that it's a different kind of standard. Like you've seen like every other blockchain other than Ethereum, like after Ethereum just copied the ERC 721 standard, where with ordinals we had like a very innovative standard where number one, everything is fully on chain, so there's no IPFS. If anything, the 10x improvement on Ordinals is IPFS, is that there's no IPFS. It's actually cheaper than adding media fully on Ethereum, because there was something was done with the space where we inscribe them was actually given a discount when it comes to the transactions. So it's like 75% discounted on fees. So that made it like much more affordable to upload any type of media onto Bitcoin as fully on chain. And so I think really the value is like permanence. The idea that like Bitcoin's been around the longest, and so therefore it's likely to be around the longest in the future. And the most number of nodes are run on Bitcoin compared to Ethereum. It's more decentralized, and like and also it's more expensive. So the fact that when you inscribe something, there's no way. Well, there is a way, but it's not even common, which is to on Ethereum, when you have a contract, you have other people mint it, and they front the cost of the gas prices, right? So with the Ordinals model, the artist has to pay the gas fees to inscribe, and they later sell it to someone else. And so that combined with the idea that there's only 210 gigabytes of space available per year, of block space available per year. That means that's like the theoretical maximum, meaning that only 210 gigabytes of Ordinals and inscriptions can ever be created per year. That's like with Ethereum and Solana, there's like no limit, right? I mean, IPFS, there's no limit. And so the idea that this block space is very scarce and also very expensive, and very durable in terms of long term, means that it will lead to a higher quality of media uploaded, since people have to pay for it. They have to have a perceived value to it. And it makes more sense for like brands who are like high end kind of luxury or one of one art, as opposed to programmability. I think Leo also mentioned earlier that you can't change the metadata, and you can't create a scenario where like with like I think what Goblin Town did, they like changed the metadata and put a middle finger over people's over their NFTs. Like that not only can't be done, well, I guess it could be done, but it's not the standard, right? So in theory, it could be done. No one has done it yet, and it kind of breaks what we have defined to be an ordinal inscription, because they have to be fully on chain. And so it's kind of like you know what you're getting into, and it's a specific thing, and that thing has a I would say just a strong contrast to ERC 721. I don't think it replaces ERC 721. I think it serves a different use case in a better way.
Very much agreed. I think all of these protocols are very much like evolving. So like you kind of alluded to there, Trevor, the fact that hey, like if I just link to an IPFS address and that's what I inscribe the link, then all of a sudden I'm just replicating the off-chain sort of aspect of other chains, and you absolutely could do that. Just the difference is like just the way the kind of culture is forming around ordinals at the moment. It's like on ord.io, like we block any external API requests. So like what you see on ord.io is stored fully on chain on Bitcoin. You're not going to be able to like do something like that. And maybe we head to a world where fees are so insanely high that it becomes more culturally acceptable, and we kind of backtrack on this full immutability property that we currently have. But at least for the time being, everything you buy, you essentially know that it's fully on chain, and like no one's gonna put a middle finger on top of your image anytime soon, at least, unless there's a major cultural shift, and that would still only affect future inscriptions. Were there any other questions in the voice hangout chat? I saw y'all started talking about other stuff, I think.
Yeah, if anyone has any questions, feel free to unmute and just ask us any questions.
Yeah, I don't see any more right now, Trevor. I mean, I can just jump in and say one of the things that surprised me was just how fast this picked up. So the amount of validation that we've got was just completely insane. It was truly, for the first 1,000 inscriptions, it was truly a few like rare Pepe, like Bitcoiner, degens, just inscribing. Like, you can go look at like the first 1,000 inscriptions. They're pretty funny. It's just a bunch of like random internet culture. I really don't think anyone realized it was going to get as big as it was. And then since 3 months ago, just some like interesting points of validation that we've seen would be Hugo Labs deciding they're going to drop their next collection on the Ordinals protocol. Frank DGods dropping their latest drop on the Ordinals protocol. We saw CZ talk about Ordinals as being one of the most exciting things that he's interested in at the moment at a conference a few weeks ago. And we just saw OpenSea tweet about Ordinals for the first time today. We saw Magic Eden, had a large group of their developers rent an Airbnb somewhere out in California and just hacked away for 2 weeks and shipped their Ordinals marketplace product. We saw Bugatti is going to drop an Ordinal collection. We saw OKX and Huobi, so this is like the 5th and 14th largest crypto exchange by volume, announced that they're going to support BRC20. That's happened over the last week. So just to me, what's surprising is like, I imagine this was just going to be a bunch of degens trading stuff for a long time, and like slowly, organically, we would validate the market of like, hey, it might make sense to do the other things that we like, but on like the largest and most secure and longest running blockchain. And eventually like the bigger names would catch on. But I think it's actually a good sign for the crypto space that, our largest brand names, like we're talking like the largest companies, Binance, OKX, all of these companies like Hugo Labs, OpenSea, like they're already like in minor ways, like putting their brand's reputational risk. They're putting their brand name in some way, like maybe it's just a tweet or maybe they're actually building a full-blown platform, but they're associating their brand with this like thing that's only been around for 3 months. And that just kind of shocks me, because the way I've seen the kind of corporate world work in the past is, a bunch of startups have to build all the infrastructure, and it takes a very long time before you get really like big companies that potentially have a lot more to lose coming in and kind of joining in on the fun. But I think there's something about just doing things on Bitcoin where people, it just resonates with basically everybody. Bitcoin was the first blockchain, and whether you like value the technical kind of aspects and properties and values of that crypto economic system or not, that's clearly like something that brands want to associate their name with. Like they want to say, our collection is on Bitcoin, and that's what we're seeing. And I guess that's why we're seeing all these larger companies feeling so comfortable associating themselves with the Ordinals protocol this early on, which I just truly did not expect. I thought, at least for the first year, this is just going to be a bunch of like degen NFT collections and maybe a few startups get spun up, and instead it's just been this like astronomical growth from 0 developers, 0 market cap to now, we have multiple protocols over $100 million market cap. We have, hundreds of developers, thousands of artists, tens of thousands of collectors, all in a just 3-month period. So very much in that kind of honeymoon rocket ship phase. And, it's really just a question of like, how large is the market opportunity? And, anybody can take their stab at, what that is. But it's been a pretty surreal last 3 months, to be completely honest, and totally exceeded my expectations. It's funny, Trevor and I think we had back-to-back NFT Now spaces on Monday, and I had like never met this guy, and then all of a sudden, he's on the Bitcoin side of things more, I'm on the Ethereum side of things, and then our worlds just kind of collided, and it was really cool to get to kind of meet people and start this new culture of like, it's like, maybe it's probably like 2/3 like NFT kind of Web3 people from like Ethereum and Solana, and then it's like 1/3 of these like kind of more hardcore Bitcoiners, but the Bitcoiners who like are able to critically think and don't just make these like kind of bizarre arguments about everything other than holding the Bitcoin currency being unethical. And that group of people had still been around on Bitcoin, and people like Trevor had been kind of fighting the good fight over there for a few years now. And it's really cool to see that like these different groups have merged together, and we're creating this kind of new culture where my number one goal in this is to bring back the culture of like experimentation to Bitcoin. Like for some reason, Bitcoin made it not cool to like try experiments. So they basically scared everyone away. So like there was very few developers trying anything interesting on top of the largest blockchain, which is just this very bizarre situation to find yourselves in. Nonetheless, that is where we were at in January of 2023. And what we're seeing now is like, the recipe of innovation is, hey, like, come try a crazy experiment. Like, we actually encourage you to try something and fail. Like, that's okay. Like, this is how Silicon Valley works. This is the recipe for innovation. You have thousands of developers come and hack stuff together on their nights and weekends, and then you get some cool things. And this kind of more entitled way of like thinking about innovation, where the Bitcoiners are like, we have endowed this single project that we will work on for 3 years, and we will call it the Lightning Protocol, and that is all we're going to do. Or this theoretical kind of thing that never actually hits the market of like RGB tokens or this sort of thing. Like, I'm much more of a fan of like, let's just bring everybody in, try a bunch of crazy stuff. We truly have to humble ourselves and not know what's exactly going to work. Nobody knows if like somebody named Domo Data is going to do a degen tweet thread late at night. Like, Domo's not even technical, and he created the protocol for fungible tokens on Bitcoin through a Twitter thread. Like, this is what I'm here for, and this is how you get rapid innovation. And I very much want experimentation and failure to be encouraged on top of Bitcoin. And I think that's what's going to ultimately attract a bunch of developers to come and like build out this Web3 ecosystem that we're gonna see take Bitcoin to kind of the next level and keep it relevant in the whole conversation of crypto.
Yeah, well said, Leo. JPEG had an interesting question. He has an interesting challenge. He said, Trevor, why haven't you bought Ordi yet? Don't you think it could be a top 20, like top 20 of all? Like, we've seen, Leo, we saw Pepe today. I don't know if you saw this, but it's like a 1.3 billion market cap is Pepe right now on ETH. Do you think Ordi can get that big on Bitcoin?
So this is where it falls under the category of like, I can't talk about it because I promised I wouldn't. But in general, BRC20, like, I can talk about BRC20 generally. Like, if you follow the just basic sort of logic of, Bitcoin has a $500 billion market cap, and the ratio of fungible tokens to the currency BTC on that chain, it's like, 1 to 5,000 or 1 to 3,000 or something like that. And then on Ethereum, it's like 1 to 1. Or like 2 to 3 or something like that. If you are just betting on trend lines, that 1 to 4,000 and, that 2 to 3, if that closes in, yeah, I mean, that's a very large market opportunity, especially given we're in a bear market. So like, if the very bull case is like that 1 to 4,000, is going to change because developers come and build the user experiences on Bitcoin to allow for a vibrant, Web3 ecosystem on top of Bitcoin. And you end up with, half the value of Bitcoin being in fungible tokens stored on that chain. And then you end up with a bull run. I mean, you're talking about like just astronomical sort of growth. Again, there's tons of reasons why that might not play out that way, but that is like definitely like the bull case that people seem to be rallying behind.
So you do think that a BRC20 coin could potentially?
I mean, absolutely, right? Like, I don't know if it'll be BRC20. Like, I keep saying this, I don't really care what protocol it is. The idea of a fungible token primitive on Bitcoin being a big deal, like that is, yes, I'm extremely bullish on that idea.
Do you see any other protocols that could rival BRC20 on Bitcoin?
So there's a bunch that have popped up over the last few days. I think they're ultimately all going to have that sort of like cold start type problem that Trevor talks about sometimes, where there's network effects that start to get locked in. They might be objectively better, specifications, better protocols than BRC20, but how do you go from 150, 200, $300 million stored in this other protocol and just like shifting that into this new protocol? It better be a lot better, and you better have a really good marketing plan. So the kind of path I'm advocating for is upgrading the BRC20 protocol to look more like a better protocol, but not actually just rugging everyone who holds BRC20 in favor of like some new protocol. I think it just gets a lot harder the higher the market cap goes for the BRC20 tokens. You're just locking in a network effect that becomes harder and harder to overthrow, and all of a sudden it's like a Betamax versus VHS type situation where the worst protocol wins out. And yeah, that's kind of what I see. Like, my bet would be we find ways to basically upgrade the BRC20 protocol and make it better and solve some of these like obvious shortcomings.
Yeah, I think that if it isn't BRC20, I think the only way to compete at this point will be to have a better standard and then do a vampire attack where you snapshot all the holders and airdrop them a similar asset on the new protocol. Like I think the network effects and capital network effect is too strong now. It's like 200 million in market cap now on BRC20 and it's like doubled from earlier this week. So I think it would have to be a vampire attack with a better standard, or some type of like protocol upgrade with BRC20. But any type of like protocol risk of like a standard failing to like evolve would just lead to a better team coming along with a new standard and then doing a vampire attack to kind of like fork the community.
I agree with that. I mean, I think it's really trivial. Like a vampire attack could be as simple as, hey, like our indexer at this block is going to start honoring transactions that look like this and not that look like the BRC20 way. And you just honor like all of the existing BRC20 transactions up until that point. And then you kind of have a fork in the indexers. And it's a social consensus thing as to which indexers people are going to look at and trade with. So these things are not honestly even real problems in my opinion. Like money will solve all these problems. Like, there's hundreds of millions of dollars at risk now. These are honestly trivial engineering problems to solve. We will find ways to solve them.
I think it's a fair point that there is this network effect of BRC20s. And really, it gets me to wonder, if a change were to be made, who would be the parties who would need to buy into that? And I think it really comes down to the indexers, because they're the ones, such as Unisat, who are displaying balances and processing all of the actions within that protocol. So I think that's one point to consider, like who holds the power for changing a BRC20 protocol. But a related question is, on the broader Ordinals protocol, if a change were to be implemented, who holds the power? And I think it comes down to Casey Rodimer. I mean, he's the one who controls that GitHub repository. Now, certainly, he wouldn't want to make a change that that the broader audience would hate him for. But it does seem to be somewhat of a concern. There's a centralization issue of the Ord wallet, which effectively controls how ordinals get inscribed. That repository is controlled by Casey. Doesn't that seem to be some centralization concern?
It's a great point, and this is definitely something that people have brought up. I always think about like, how does this actually practically play out? You're right. Casey does have probably the most powerful voice in the space right now. And if Casey uses that voice to make a decision that most people are aligned with, it will probably happen. Let's just take the absolute extreme scenario. Casey does some crazy upgrade to that GitHub repo that like rugs everybody, and some crazy sort of change that 99% of people are against it. All that's going to happen is he's going to merge that PR into the repo, and he's going to increment the release number. And then none of the people actually running nodes and actually running that code are just going to do the upgrade, because it would make zero sense. Nobody, they're running products and services, right? Like that, want to serve customers at the end of the day. And if Casey does something that's not in their financial best interest, they're just not going to run that code. And we're already seeing multiple people are writing their own indexers. The guys at Luxor Mining have created their own indexer, implemented in Go. So we're seeing a slow kind of path towards decentralization there. But it's very similar to Vitalik and Ethereum. Like if Vitalik does something like upgrading the proof of stake that the majority of the community is behind, then yes, he has the power to say we're going to do it this month or next month. But does Vitalik have the ability to just say, hey, we're rugging every ERC20 token, just terrible ideas? They don't have enough power to truly do terrible ideas. We're in an absolutely centralized system like Twitter, for example. Elon could, if he wants to, snap his fingers and, re-scramble all of our usernames if he wants to, or do literally anything that he wants. So it's very much a spectrum, and there are entities that have power, just like in the Bitcoin crypto economic system. There's large miners that control 30% of hash power or whatever. They have a pretty large say in the crypto economic system of Bitcoin, but there's many players, right? Like miners are just one player in the game. Marketplaces are another player in the game. us as holders of Bitcoin, like we get to vote with our wallets. That's another player in the game. Influencers are another player in the game. And what you end up with, like, is this kind of social consensus, somewhat distributed system where the buck stops with social consensus at the end of the day. If we all decide as holders of Bitcoin that we want there to be 22 million Bitcoin, there will be 22 million Bitcoin. Like, so all of this at the end of the day in a crypto economic system is social consensus, and it's no different with ordinals. I do want us just kind of continue down a path of like, let's have more indexers, and let's have more GitHub repos, and let's have more marketplaces, and let's have more influencers. And ultimately, when you spread that out over time, it just becomes kind of a non-issue where it's much harder for Casey to shove some terrible idea down the whole ecosystem.
Yeah, it makes sense. People would need to actually adopt his updated release, and they could revolt against that if they didn't like it.
Yep, exactly. Yeah, to me, it's like in the Unisat example, Unisat is in a very unique position with BRC20 where they have the most popular indexer, and they actually just open sourced it, which was really cool to see. But they have something probably like 95% of volume of BRC20 tokens, and they have probably the best technical implementation of an indexer. And you basically, that is an area of centralization that is a little bit more interesting, just because it's so early. But I expect the same thing to happen. Just like Casey had authoritarian type levels of authority in the first couple weeks of ordinals, the space just outgrew Casey, just like it will outgrow Unisat, and there will be multiple marketplaces, and it'll just get distributed amongst a bunch of different players. And if you want to change something, everybody has to come together to a table and kind of adopt a change with like the majority of social consensus kind of agreeing with that. But I would say BRC20 more, your point applies more to BRC20 at the moment. Unisat could probably do an upgrade pretty easily, and nobody would really have much of a say in that because they just have somewhat of a monopoly at the moment.
Thanks for sharing.
Yeah, I agree with everything Leo said. Good points, Leo.
Awesome. Is Poppy here? Like, I don't know how long we were going to run this for. Like, I'm happy to stick around I can stick around for 20 more minutes if we want to. But if nobody has any more questions, like, we can wrap this up.
Yeah, I have a few more. I can do like 10 more minutes.
Awesome.
Yeah, feel free to wrap it up. Just didn't see any questions, but yeah, we're always open to hold on a couple more minutes after if there's any discussion.
I had a question, if it's okay.
Sure, go ahead.
So you mentioned as long as there's a consensus, right? That things are going to it'll be this way, as long as everyone comes to the table and a vote is made. But what if it's like a really divisive vote? Like, what if it's really like something like that, that divides people? And then there's I can't remember what it's called, but like Bitcoin Cash, right? They did the words. Yeah, so what happens like that, but it really does split the Bitcoin users, and the traditionalists go this way, and the people who are moving forward with the new way of things. What are your thoughts on that in terms of kind of what you just explained?
So fortunately, the Bitcoin protocol doesn't need to be changed for any of this stuff. So we're only talking about these off-chain indexers, which are a lot easier to upgrade than making an official upgrade, like forking the Bitcoin protocol. But yeah, it's going to be a social consensus fork, right? People are going to, say, hey, I like it this way, so I'm going to trade on this marketplace. And other people are going to say, hey, I like it this way, and I'll trade on another marketplace. And one of those sides will probably trend to zero, and the other one will win out. And it's usually a messy battle on social media where, people are buying Bitcoin.com and Bitcoin.org, and they're both owned by different organizations who are each saying that Bitcoin is a different thing. Like, I'm obviously referring to the kind of 2017 fork that happened with Bcash. So it's messy, but it all works itself out in these crypto economic systems. Like, people will vote with their wallets, and wherever they think value should lie is where probably you'll see the path end up forking and kind of just going in that direction. But it is messy when these things happen. Trevor, were you going to say something there?
Yeah, I mean, I would say so what you'll have is you will have multiple competing indexers with different things. The reality is, though, for ordinals, that's zero risk. All it does is it changes your inscription number. So I mean, it kind of sucks for you if you got like the 1 millionth, which says the word piggy, but otherwise, like you'll probably like go to a site like Gamma or something, and then you'll see like it'll just like show you the inscription number, and it will say like five. It'll have like 5 different indexers. It'll say like, here's the Ordinals Hub indexer, says this is like number 1 million. Here's the Gamma indexer, says this. Like you can have that. And I think that'll be fine, and then users can make their own decision as to what the number is, and there can be like, a certain of like percentage of share of like what that truth is. But the point is, it's like very low risk. Like there's almost no risk to it. All it does is it just changes the inscription number, which for a small percentage of users, like maybe it sucks, but for everyone else, it's like no material difference. And then when you're adding like more functionality, like defining what a collection is, again, this is like a low risk. Like if someone's indexer doesn't get it, then they just can add that feature later. Like some indexers won't have it, but it won't really add a material difference. I think that's actually different with BRC20 because now we're dealing with like something like a double spend attack, or like a difference in the history could result in like a difference in people's like token balance. So that's like a risk to be aware of and to think about. But for Ordinals itself, the indexing risk is very, very low. So I think that's how I think about which of these protocols are going to catch on and not, and how the division of assets and tech will exist on L1 versus L2 based on like how risky is the indexing problem and how difficult is the social coordination. So if you do have something like very divisive, like, well, it's not high stakes. That's the point. It's like this is like very low stakes in terms of like what the different history of the truth is. So if you do create an indexer where it is like going to be very high stakes, then that's going to be put on an L2 in my opinion.
The L2 stuff's going to be really interesting. I think we're like, Trevor, we were kind of talking about like, we talk about all these things like slightly before they happen, except we don't realize how quickly they're going to happen. Like this was definitely the case with fungible tokens. Yeah, like, basically fees are up 100x since Ordinals started, and fees are up 10x since like a week ago. At what point do the fees really push developers to start realizing like, wow, we definitely need to start building, taking L2 a lot more seriously in the Bitcoin ecosystem. Like, are we there yet? I'm not quite seeing the demand yet, but like, is there a point at 1,000 sats per V byte? Like, there's obviously a point where people are going to want to use L2s. Like, how do you think that all kicks in?
Yeah, my like rough like finger in the wind is like around 500 to 1,000. I think that you have like a effect where like it obviously goes up and down. So like, can't like boil the frog right away. It's like got to go up like kind of steadily. So I think like if it hits 1,000, then it'll go back down to like the 500 range. So if it hits 500, it's going to go back down to the range right now. Right now is like a material difference, but I don't think you have like a strong pain like until like around 500 from here. So that's why, when we were at like, I think we were at like, 5, 10, 15, I was like, we could go, 100x from here probably and not have a material impact. Like people will just probably use it less, and then so people start using it less, and then like the gas price goes back down, and then more people are using it, but they're all using it like that frequency, then it goes up. So you have this kind of like up and down effect. And then I think around 1,000, like I wouldn't be surprised if in the bull market we get to 10x from here. So I think around that mark, it's going to be like just a wave to all the other all the L2s that have integration with the BRC20s and the Ordinals.
Right. Especially if speed matters for your use case. Like right now, the kind of clever hack, you just fire it off at 10 sats per V byte, and just like overnight that'll hopefully get picked up. But a 24-hour people who are used to like Solana and stuff, like that would be completely unacceptable to wait 24 hours for a transaction to get picked up. So yeah, like as far as like just other use cases, like Bitcoin L1 is going to be limited in use cases just because of the cost to do things. Like, do you like how are you seeing the kind of like hybrid approach of like moving assets between L1s and L2s? Like you're obviously seeing kind kind of interesting bridges happening. Like people are already like, vaulting their ordinal inscriptions, and I think like the highest volume collection Bitcoin punks, like that's actually happening on OpenSea. Do you think like these things are going to merge nicely together like that, and people are going to be kind of playing nicely between L1 and L2, or like what does that world look like to you?
Yeah, I mean, I think Emblem Vault is going to be like the low hanging fruit for this. I got to get them on stacks, man. Like they're killing it with the OpenSea integration, but I think like they need to like raise probably like a ton of money to like accelerate their speed, because I think their model is very elegant. What you will see, I mean, there's another company that I've invested in that's doing an Ordinals bridge that's launching, I think, next week. Yeah, I mean, like we'll just see bridges and there'll be various security guarantees. I mean, I think the way that Stacks is set up, it'll have the best security guarantees, because it's the nodes are very like aware of Bitcoin and allow you to program that, as opposed to like EVM, like there's no awareness, right? So we'll have to like basically deposit a UTXO or the BRC20 thing. It's actually because when you sell the BRC20s, you actually are using it as an ordinal, when like prior to trying to trade it, you're not using it as an ordinal. It's just like a paper record. That makes it like easy to bridge, actually. So I think that was like really clever. I was really surprised at how, like when I actually started realizing what was going on and like started looking at how Domo did it. I don't know if he had that later, but that was like a really smart move. And so I do think it'll be fairly easy to just bridge them and like, peg them in, peg them out, just like any type of bridge.
Yeah, interesting. Yeah, the bridging definitely feels like an area that's, yeah, it's cool you invested in another company there. I definitely think like bridging is the easiest way to like leverage an L2. Like, obviously somewhat kind of centralized, but like allows you to have that kind of checking account, savings account model where the L1 is the savings account and you do most of your transactions with the checking account. So it doesn't matter that you're handing, your debit card to, someone in the drive-through window or something. I think that's really all I had. Any final closing thoughts, Trevor?
Yeah, I mean, I think you guys should get into Ordinals. I mean, download Hero Xverse wallet. You can, if you want to do decentralized trading from like ETH to BTC, I use Shapeshift, which is like Eric Voorhees' Thor chain kind of DEX. It's pretty easy to use. You also use a centralized exchange. I think there's a lot of opportunity in Ordinals. I think things are happening every day. And it's only going to get better and more exciting from here. So, if you guys have any questions, feel free to reach out to me. I come in here on the voice chat sometimes late at night, but not as frequently as I like to. Me and Leo also host the Ordinal show every Monday morning at 10:30 a.m. Eastern and 6:30 p.m. Wednesdays. So like one morning, one evening. We'd love to have you guys come up and hang out with us. Our Twitter handle is at the Ordinal Show. My Twitter handle is at TO. Leonidas here is at Leonidas NFT, right?
Correct, yep.
So yeah, if you guys are interested, feel free to hit us up in DMs. I'm a big fan of this MVHQ community. Been going to all the events. Anything we can do to help you guys and share some alpha. I guess Leo won't give away his picks. I'll give away my picks as long as you guys don't tell anyone.
My pick is BRC20, Trevor. BRC20 and ordinal inscriptions. There you go.
Yep. I'll give you guys some projects that are not financial advice, but yeah, a lot of fun. So thanks Leo for joining. I kind of roped Leo in here, and I'm glad he came as well. Always excited to hear his perspective, and so I hope you guys got some value out of this.
Appreciate y'all welcoming me to this group, guys. Everybody have a great weekend. Peace.
Thank you guys again for your time. Thank you for everyone that tuned in. I think we had a wonderful conversation. We covered everything from history to how to get involved, websites to check out. We covered a lot of good ground. Just want to say thank you again to our hosts. And I just dropped their information in VC Hangout. So if you want to follow up with their show, want to hit them up, DM them, feel free to reach out. Again, thank you guys very much. Peace.